and the enemies within. Trevor is an activist and political researcher from Christchurch, New Zealand. He believes in freedom with responsibility, not freedom from responsibility. His ideal society is one in which government is confined to protecting its citizens from criminals and external enemies. Please give a warm welcome to Trevor.
Thanks to that, Connie, and thanks to my hosts for having me here. It's great to be in this beautiful area. I've never been in this part of Nevada before, and it's stunning. We're very lucky to live here. Really, really lovely. Now, can everybody hear me at the back okay?
Yes.
Can you understand a genuine Southern accent? Let me know if you can't. We do say some things differently. Now, look, I want to say the first thing everybody always asks me is why I should care about the politics of America. Why do I come all the way 12,000 miles across the Pacific to talk to you people? Well, there are two basic reasons I care. The first is simple gratitude. My country was only saved in World War II by the huge sacrifice of your grandfathers and uncles and fathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway. And that memory is very strong in my country today. The second reason is related, but it's a little bit more selfish. You know, Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom fails in the United States, if you lose your constitution and your liberty and your economy and your military superiority, freedom will fail everywhere, folks. If you lose it here, people, we go down all over the planet. If you lose your military superiority, the bad guys of this planet, Russia, China, Iran, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, North Korea, and their Islamic allies will carve up this planet amongst themselves. Now, I get emails all the time from Americans. They say, look, if things turn bad here, can I come and live in New Zealand? All the time. And I say, look, come down, you'll love the place. It's beautiful, the people are friendly, the politics will drive you nuts, but it's worth a visit. But please don't think of it as a refuge, because it isn't. You know, just 1,500 miles to the north of my country lie the beautiful Fijian Islands. Wonderful tourist destination, but the Chinese are now training the Fijian military. They're building big hydroelectric dams on the islands. Fiji is now a Chinese client state. And Tonga is just about there, as are the Cook Islands and a whole bunch of other islands through the Pacific. Last year, the Australian Minister of Defence was up in China for talks. And a retired general publicly embarrassed him. He said, Australia needs a godfather. The question is, do you have an American godfather or a Chinese godfather? If you are smart, you will choose China, because we are the growing power in the region. Now, he wouldn't have been arrogant enough to say that under Bush, or even under Clinton, certainly not under Reagan, but he's arrogant enough to say it now, because he sees the leadership coming out of your White House. And all around this planet, folks, your allies are freaking out. From Israel to Germany to Britain to Canada, South Korea, Japan, Australia, Taiwan, all of them are freaking out because they see that your president seems to love the bad guys more than he loves them. And they are questioning, folks, whether it's worth being an American ally. They saw what your president did to Czechoslovakia and Poland, took away their missile shield, protecting them from the Russians. They saw him abandon Georgia to the Russians. They see him doing nothing to help the Ukrainians now to break away from the Russians. Nothing to help the Venezuelans who are trying to throw out the Cubans right now. They see what he's doing to Israel every single day. Israel has no friends left in the Middle East at all now because of the meddling of your president. and they may be forced to take desperate measures to defend themselves, and those measures could put us into World War III. Japan was never supposed to rearm after World War II. There's now rearming. And that worries us in Australia and New Zealand, I can tell you. But we don't blame them. Could you trust Obama to protect you from North Korea and China?
Nope.
So all around the world, folks, you've got a president who cries peace all the time. He's got a Nobel Peace Prize in his trophy cabinet. Yet he's leading the world into war. Because he's abandoned Reagan's doctrine of peace through strength. And if you lose your strength, folks, your peace will go very shortly afterwards. So this is very, very serious for the Western world. You saw where this is going when your president called for support to go into Syria. All your allies were lining up, right? Couldn't wait to get on board, could they? One country was willing to help out. Now, I'm not saying they should have. It was just another example of Obama madness. But it just shows where American prestige is going around the world. Now, Vladimir Putin, the old KGB man who spent most of his career trying to destroy your country, is now regarded as more of a statesman on the world stage than the so-called leader of the free world. That has big implications for all of us, folks. That's why every New Zealander, Australian, Canadian, German has a huge vested interest in America restoring its constitution and restoring its liberty and keeping militarily strong. Because if that military goes, folks, peace goes with it. For all of us. And you saw Obama just a couple of days ago wants to cut your armed forces down to pre-World War II levels. Because you've got no enemies, right? The Russians love you, the Chinese love you, the Iranians love you. Europe's economically sound, right?
Negative.
You know, your economy's booming, right? All the ducks are in a row, everything's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is the time Obama wants to slash your military to pieces. Now, the book, my first book, I was the guy who exposed Frank Marshall Davis, by the way, you know, the communist who mentored Obama as a young man. I also exposed Van Jones, the communist who got kicked out of the White House, the Green Job Czar. That was all done through my first book, Barack Obama and the Enemies Within. Nearly 700 pages detailing Obama's ties to pro-Soviet Marxist and anti-American communists. 700 pages. And I'll tell you what, this is heavy, folks. And I got bloody sick of lugging this around the country. Right? And I vowed and declared that my next book would be smaller. And this one is The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists and Progressives in the US Congress. And guess what? It's bigger. Because those bloody commies just kept on coming. The deeper I dug, the more I found. Now, 5 years of research in libraries all over the United States, digging through communist publications and whatever. The evidence is all there, people. It's all there. Now, the book is really about this new book is really about the two big secrets of modern communism. The first secret, I think they borrowed from the devil. Because we all know that the cleverest thing the devil ever did was to convince people he doesn't exist. And what have the communists done in the last 20 years, folks?
Taught in our schools.
Well, yeah, they've done that.
Pretend they don't exist.
But they pretend they don't exist, right? And if they exist, they're no longer a threat, right? That's the general consensus out there. And unfortunately, it's just not true. The second big secret of modern communism, which directly contradicts the first, is the ability, and this is hardly ever written about, all the books on the subject, it is the ability of a tiny Marxist-Leninist party, maybe only a few hundred comrades strong, to influence and even control the legislative process in their country. In other words, to write the laws. So what I'm saying is that less than 20,000 card-carrying communists in your country are writing the laws that govern more than 300 million Americans. Bit far-fetched, isn't it? Very small tail wagging a very big dog, isn't it?
Betcha.
Now when these people stand for public office under their own name, as they do occasionally, they get sort of 67 votes or 122 votes or something, and people laugh at them. How could they be any threat? But is it just the number of votes you can muster? Is that the only determinant of your political influence? How many votes did the mob ever get in Las Vegas? Telling me they didn't run that town for a long time? How many votes does the mafia get in Sicily? Telling me they don't run that province? Bribery, corruption, intimidation, thuggery, propaganda, vote fraud, backroom deals, indoctrination. There's a whole bunch of ways that small, covert, organised groups can manipulate much larger groups from behind the scenes. And that's what Leninism is, folks. Leninism is the science of small groups taking over much larger groups and holding that power. Less than 2,000 Bolsheviks took over Russia in 1917, a country at the time of 140 million people. And they've had 100 years to refine their arts, folks. They've had 100 years to get better and better and better at it. And they are real good now, I can tell you that. Now, that's all that, you know, and the mechanism they use, the main mechanism, and you should understand that here in Nevada, the main mechanism is control of the labour unions. Now you're very lucky for a long time in this country because your AFL-CIO was run by hardcore anti-communists like Lane Kirkland and George Meany. Hardcore guys. But in 1995 there was a coup. A very significant event, and I'm sure you've never heard of it. Because that was the year that Democratic Socialists of America, a Gramsciist communist group, your largest Marxist organisation, 7,000 members, that was the year they took over the AFL-CIO. Took it over lock, stock and barrel, people. They put their man, John Sweeney, in as president, and now their protege, Richard Trumka, runs it for them. The first thing that Sweeney did was to abolish the anti-communist clause from the AFL-CIO's constitution, and the Marxists came flooding back. Now they control AFSCME, SEIU, NEA, United Auto Workers, the whole lot. All major labour unions in this country are under Marxist control. Now there's a significance to this. This is only 11% of the workforce, or 12%. But the significance of this is simple. You would know this in Nevada. How many elected Democrats at any level in your country do not owe their job to the labour unions? Probably zero. They need the labour unions for money, for manpower, for get out to vote, and for vote fraud. And if somebody gets you your job, and you rely on them to get re-elected, and they tell you to do something, what do, people?
You vote for it.
You do it.
You go lock, stock and barrel for what they want. So this is how it works. The Marxists set a policy. It might be socialisation of student loans, or green jobs, or normalisation of relations with Cuba. The Marxists set a policy. They make it labour union policy, and the unions make it Democrat policy. Very simple. There's not a policy in today's Democratic Party, not a policy that cannot be traced back to the Communist Party USA or Democratic Socialists of America, or both. They set the agenda, folks. By controlling the labour unions, they set the agenda. You ever wondered why all the old centrist Democrats like Joe Lieberman are no longer in the Democratic Party? Because in 1995, Democratic Socialists of America took over the unions and started a purge of all moderate and centrist Democrats. Anybody who wouldn't follow the line was out. You ain't voting for Harry Truman anymore, folks, or JFK. You're voting for socialists if you vote Democrat. So, but how about some examples in real life? Because this is all academic. This is just some guy from New Zealand telling you this. Well, I want to start with an example from my country first. And one or two ex-Navy people in the room might remember this incident. Back in 1984, we elected a socialist Labour government. The first thing they did was to ban nuclear warships from our harbours. Overnight, that destroyed the Australia-New Zealand-United States military alliance, ANZUS, killed it stone cold dead. They're still dead today. So how come, at the height of the Cold War, could a pro-Western, pro-American country like New Zealand, whose bacon had been saved by you only a generation before, how could we basically kick your warships out of our harbours and destroy our military alliance with you? Well, this is how it was engineered, folks, and it was engineered. A few years after this incident, I had the privilege over several months of interviewing a New Zealander who had infiltrated our Communist Party for our security services. He was a government spy inside the Communist Party. In 1983, he and 3 genuine comrades were given the greatest honour any communist could enjoy. They were sent to Moscow to train at Lenin's Institute for Higher Learning in Leningradsky Prospect, the Lenin School. 6,500 students at any one time, many of them on 7-year courses, many of them with one-to-one tutelage. The training academy for the future world communist leadership. They were all taught Russian history, they were taught trade union building, they were taught racial agitation, espionage techniques, but the most important thing they were taught was how to take Moscow's policies back to their own country, and by using the labour unions and the peace movement and even the churches to turn Moscow's policies into their own government's policies. And they did this countless times, folks, throughout the Third World and the Western world. They were writing the laws of many countries, not just their own. Now this was the time of the massive anti-nuclear marches through Europe. Hundreds of thousands of people marching through Rome and Berlin and Paris with big ban the bomb banners, get America out of Europe, disband NATO, no nukes. Hundreds of thousands of people. And there was a real fear in some circles that NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which you guys are the linchpin of, might break up. And the Soviets, of course, were funding all of this and directing it because they wanted to take NATO down. That would give them control of Europe. And I'm going to tell you straight, people, your military, just 1983, just like in 2014, your military and your military alliances are Moscow's #1 target. Because they know if they can destroy your military and alienate you from your allies, Russia, China and Iran and their friends rule this planet. No one else is going to stop them, folks. Ireland ain't going to do it. Canada ain't going to do it. Italy ain't going to do it. Only you can stop them and your military. That's why, despite this little spat over Syria, Vladimir Putin loves Mr. Obama. Because no one has done more to destroy your military and alienate your allies than this current president. No one. He's done more damage to your military than virtually any army on the planet could hope to achieve. And the plan is this, folks. Get you worried about your economy, get you worried about your survival, and then gut the military. Because if your economy was humming right now, you would not tolerate what Obama is doing to your armed services. You would not tolerate it because it puts every one of your lives and all of your children's lives at risk right now. Remember, Obama has worked with pro-Soviet Marxists like Frank Marshall Davis and Alice Palmer in Chicago and Quentin Young his entire life. Their agenda was to destroy your military in favour of Moscow. The most significant thing your president said in his entire first term of office, when he was caught in South Korea off mic, so he thought, talking to then Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. When I get re-elected, Mr. Medvedev, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. Yes, said Medvedev, I understand. I will pass your message on to Vladimir. We are with you. How much more of a signal do you need, people? So, The Soviets had this big game going on in Europe. But they're subtle, they're chess players, they are very subtle people. So they were thinking, well, we want to take out NATO, how about we take away another country from outside of Europe, out of the Western Alliance, and use the propaganda value of that to help destroy NATO. So they picked on New Zealand, because we're small and liberal and progressive, and the communists had infiltrated our unions, our peace movement, and our Labour Party right into Parliament. But they had an issue because they're thinking, well, we want to get New Zealand out of ANZUS, but the problem is New Zealanders love America. We can't play the anti-American card. How are we going to sell this? And when I say sell, folks, I'm not kidding. If you think American corporations are good at selling and marketing, they could learn from Moscow. They had 17 experts on New Zealand alone. They had historians and sociologists and psychologists and marketing experts and sporting experts and cultural experts and even religious experts. Because they needed to know everything there was to know about New Zealand to influence New Zealand public opinion. Same as they do in America, folks. They know more about Nevada than you do. I can tell you that right now. They know your cultural, your religious, your economic breakdown. They know it all. So they were thinking, well, New Zealand, and I grew up with this, I grew up as a New Zealand socialist, and we believed that we led the world in social welfare. We were pioneers of progressivism, and the world listened to us. We punched above our weight. It's a bit of an ego thing. So the Soviets played to that. This wasn't going to be an anti-American campaign. They designed some slogans that were going to be patriotic New Zealand slogans. This was all going to be about Kiwis standing up for peace, New Zealanders standing against the nuclear arms race, New Zealanders striking an independent foreign policy course. Not a whiff of anti-Americanism. So these 4 delegates went back to New Zealand, armed with some slogans and a program. They held secret meetings with the Labour Party, the peace movement and the unions. They mounted a campaign, and in 6 months legislation was in front of our Parliament, it was signed off, and ANZUS was dead. The Soviets could not believe how quickly it went. And I'll tell you, next time you hear a Kiwi down in Vegas, they think that's the capital of America, by the way, most New Zealanders. Next time you hear a Kiwi say, oh, look, you're a New Zealander, what about that anti-nuclear thing back in the 80s? I've heard about it. I guarantee you this, 90% of them will puff out their chest with pride and say, yeah, we did it. We stood up for peace. We were the mouse that roared. They'll be so proud. And hardly one of them in 4 million people has any idea that the policies they so love were designed by the KGB at Lenin's Institute in Moscow. A whole country was suckered, and is still suckered today. But could this happen in America?
You betcha.
If I'd said that 10 years ago, what would you have said?
No.
Nah, delusional. Couldn't happen here. Amazing how things change, isn't it? Okay, well, exactly. But I'm going to say, well, I'm going to give a couple of examples. We'll start with one. Now, if you've been following the news closely, you might have heard of this one. It's called Obamacare. You've been keeping up? Good to hear. Look, I know that Obamacare is not yet fully socialised healthcare. It's not single payer, where the government pays all the bills. We all know where it's heading. Harry Reid's admitted it. Jan Schakowsky's admitted it. This is going to government-run healthcare, folks. That's the plan. I just want to say, because I come from a country that's had single-payer healthcare my entire life. And I'll tell you straight, folks, it sucks. It sucks big time. Anything you've ever heard about it is true and worse. But I still get liberals and even some Republicans will say to me, oh, pre-existing conditions, the uninsured, you know, this is what they do in Europe, it's not really socialism, it'll be okay. The big thing they all forget about is that one word, quality. Now when it comes to your healthcare, folks, is anything more important than quality?
No.
When your kid's life's at stake?
No.
You want a quality doctor, do you not?
Yep.
You want quality healthcare? Now think about it this way. If you're in a free market healthcare system, now I know you don't have that here, but at least you still have strong elements of it. If you're in a free market system, you are a customer. And you business folk in the room, how do you treat your customers? Pretty darn good. Take them golfing, go gambling with them, make friends with them. It's the American way, right? And if you're a doctor, your patient is your customer. And the longer that patient lives, and the happier and healthier and more productive that patient is, the more holidays they can afford to give you, right? That's how it works. But what if the government pays all the bills? Government pays all your healthcare bills. That sounds great, doesn't it? But the budget is fixed because it has to be a fixed budget. The budget might be this big, but the needs are infinite. The budget is fixed, the needs are infinite. What do you then become, folks? You become a liability. You are a liability on that system. And you business folk in the room, how do you treat your liabilities, people? Eliminate them, right? Business 101, eliminate your liabilities. I talk to people in this country, they say, look, under Obamacare, we might have death panels. Like people might be deciding, panels might decide who lives and who dies. Get real, people. You don't need death panels. Every head of every department in every hospital throughout the Western world is his own death panel. You think about it, you're the head of the oncology department at Christchurch Public Hospital where I live. Your budget is $20 million a year for chemotherapy. Fixed budget. It's getting towards the end of the year. Your budget's running low. You've got a 75-year-old guy in this bed with prostate cancer. He needs $200,000 worth of chemo to extend his life 2 or 3, maybe 5 years. You've got a 7-year-old girl in this bed with leukemia. She needs $200,000 worth of chemotherapy. That might extend her life 30, 40, 50 years. She might marry, have children, have a career. Your budget's running out. You can only afford to treat one of them. What are you going to do, folks? What would any humane person do? Look, we don't talk about rationing in New Zealand. We just understand that if you're old and not paying taxes and you're a useless eater, you do not get the same level of treatment as someone who's young and productive. You just don't. Because the budget is fixed and the needs are unlimited. You have to ration. You have to triage. You cannot do it any other way. That's how they do it in Australia. That's how they do it in Europe. That's how they do it in Canada, which is why they all come here. But it's going to be different in America, right? Because the laws of economics don't apply here, do they? Anybody who tells you there won't be rationing, folks, is lying straight to your face. Because that's the only way it can work. Just don't get old, and don't be too young, and don't be infirm, and you'll be okay.
Don't get sick.
Don't get sick. Or have enough money to pay off a doctor, because that's how it works. Now, the father of the single-payer healthcare system in this country is a man called Quentin Young. He's pushing 90 now. He's a retired physician from Chicago. And in my darker moments, I often wish he'd gone to live in Britain 20 years ago, because he probably wouldn't be with us now. But he is. He is, and he's been working to destroy the greatest healthcare system in the world for 50 years now. He's set up Physicians for a National Health Plan. He's worked with the AMA. He's worked with Canadian doctors. He's worked with people like John Conyers and other reps to get single-payer legislation in front of your Congress on several occasions. And it's always been voted down. But finally, in 2009, with the Affordable Health Care Act, they started to make progress. And it's not surprising the progress came under Mr. Obama, because for many years in Chicago, Quentin Young was Mr. Obama's personal physician. openly claims credit for indoctrinating Obama into socialised healthcare. Says Obama was a big single-payer fan when he was an Illinois state senator and nobody paid any attention to him. Quentin Young was a 40-year veteran of the Communist Party USA. Any Vietnam veterans in the room at all? Thank you, I knew there would be some. Thank you. In the early 1970s, Quentin Young and 3 other left-wing doctors went to North Vietnam to offer their services to the communist government while they were trying to kill you guys. That's how patriotic Quentin Young is. Quentin Young went on to join Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, and they are the people behind Obamacare, folks. It's their baby. They've been pushing this 40 years now as their #1 priority. They've been pushing it through the AFL-CIO, which they control. They've been pushing it through the Congressional Progressive Caucus, 80 members in your House, including dear Stephen Horsford from here, which they set up. It was set up by Democratic Socialists of America. It's their policy tool inside your Congress. They've used a whole bunch of academic organisations to promote this. They had people on Hillary's health committee when she tried to get it through. They had several of their members on that. It's their baby. And now they are boasting in their publications that Obamacare is going to fail. But that's good, people, because then they're going to blame the greedy doctors and the insurance companies, and single payer comes next. This was just a step on the road, folks, and DSA is right behind it. Now, to prove the issue, just before the last election, the Obama campaign put out a little video designed to mock Mitt Romney. They said, "Hey Mitt, guess what? The joke's on you, brother. You know how you hate Obamacare and you want to abolish it? Well, the man who designed it for us, the architect of it, John McDonough, former Massachusetts state legislator, Harvard academic, well, he designed that for us, Mitt, but guess what? He was the man who designed Romneycare as well. So ha-ha." And it's true. McDonough did design both systems. Mitt Romney got a bill out of the Massachusetts state legislature which is chock full of Democratic Socialists of America supporters, and he tried to modify it and push it back and make it less socialist. But he got his name stuck to it. What the video did not say was that John McDonough was the Boston chairman of Democratic Socialists of America. So a DSA designed Obamacare, Democratic Socialists of America promoted it through all their organisations, and another member of that group personally indoctrinated your president into it. And they are on the verge of socialising between 1/6 and 1/4 of your economy and destroying the greatest medical system the world has ever seen. And you ain't going to let them do it, are you, people?
No.
Damn right. Now I want to go into another example that's very timely, and I'm sure you will resonate in Nevada. That is comprehensive immigration reform, otherwise known as amnesty.
That's right.
Now you have people in the Republican Party like John McCain and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and John Boehner and Eric Cantor who tell you this is going to be good for the GOP. Because you all know that when you give the illegal immigrants, 12, 20, 30 million, how many there are, when you give them citizenship and voting rights, they're all going to be so grateful, they're all going to start ticking the R's, right?
Wrong.
Delusional. You know, the black population in this country has been ticking the D's for more than 60 years. No matter what the Democrats do to degrade them, destroy their families, they still keep ticking those D's, right? The Jewish population in this country has been voting Democrat for more than 100 years. No matter what Obama does to Israel, they still tick those D's, right? So the Latinos, who are most of the illegals, they're very socially conservative. They may change in 20 or 30 years. We've got 2.5 years to save this country, folks. It ain't going to change in that time. 2.5 years, and I'll explain why soon. So why are these Republicans telling you this garbage? Could it be connected in any way to the fact that the US Chamber of Commerce has spent $1.7 billion promoting amnesty over the last 10 years. What do you think the Chamber wants out of this, folks? Cheap labour. Not hard, is it? Cheap labour to run their factories and farms. And is it a coincidence that the Republicans who are most avidly pushing this rubbish are the ones most closely connected to big agribusiness and the US Chamber of Commerce? Or could I be being a bit cynical here? Could there be a connection, do you think? Because their profits, as you all understand, are far more important than your border security or your national integrity or the laws of your land, right?
You betcha.
To them it is. But the real driver of this is the hard left. This came out of the left, folks. It started in California in the 1950s with a man called Bert Corona, a Communist Party member and also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs in the early 60s, the first organised effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, on party instructions, a whole network of immigrant support networks, illegal immigrant support networks, through the entire Southwest and Southern California. The program was designed to encourage illegals across the border to get them work in factories and farms, eventually get them citizenship and voting rights. It was a deliberate program, folks. Now this man, Bert Corona, trained hundreds of disciples. He was mainly funded by the government and unions, did a lot of work. But he trained many disciples. 3 of them are very prominent today. One of them was Antonio Villagrosa, who was until recently the mayor of Los Angeles, a hardcore Marxist, used to go down and cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers down in Cuba. He turned Los Angeles into a sanctuary city. He forbade the LAPD from enforcing immigration laws, and their illegals flooded in. Changed the entire demographics of that state. Another member of this little group, and they all work very closely, is Gil Cedillo, another hardcore Marxist, big-time immigration activist, big-time Obama supporter, and big-time Communist Party USA supporter. Until recently, the leader of the California State Senate. He is the one that got the DREAM Act pushed through in California, which gave all sorts of rights to the children of undocumented workers. The third member of this little group is Maria Elena Durazzo, the most powerful woman in California, currently the head of the California AFL-CIO. Another Marxist. She was the woman who spearheaded the massive union-driven Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that added hundreds of thousands of Latino voters to the California rolls, almost all Democrats. Orange County, once the most conservative county in the entire United States, is now purple. California, once a reddish-purple state, is now solidly blue, all as the result of the work of Bert Corona and Villagrosa and Durazzo and Cedillo and their friends. A deliberate program, folks. Deliberate. Go to Arizona next door. A man died there in 2012 in Tucson, one of the most successful politicians to come out of that state in decades. I bet you've never heard of him. A man called Lorenzo Torres, the head of the Communist Party USA's Latino Commission. His job was just like Corona's, to set up support networks for illegals, to encourage them across the border from Texas to Nevada, New Mexico to Colorado, Arizona, right across the Southwest. To get them through and settle here. Deliberate program. He was also in charge of mustering opposition to any attempt to crack down on illegal immigration. He ran the big campaign against SB 1070 in Arizona a couple of years ago, a campaign, thanks to people like you, that they lost. Torres also set up movements in Tucson and Phoenix, which gave Arizona, one of the reddest states in the Union, 3 Communist Party affiliated reps in your House of Representatives. Raul Grijalva, Ed Pastor, and the freshman Kirsten Sinema, all Communist Party supporters, all as a result of Lorenzo Torres. Now we'll go to who is running it now. The man running the immigrants' rights movement in this country right now is a man called Eliseo Medina. And you would have seen him in Las Vegas in his purple shirt leading an immigration rally, I can assure you. He is the man, he was until recently the Executive Vice President of the SEIU union, very strong in your state, largest union in your country, and the one with the biggest Latino membership. He's a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America, a Communist Party USA supporter, and also a former member of Obama's Latino Advisory Committee. He is the man who got the bill through your Senate. He has been working and lobbying, using his union members to rally outside the offices of Republican Party congressmen to get them to pass an immigration bill through the House. He works very closely with Raul Grijalva on immigration issues, and very closely with Luis Gutierrez, the rep from Illinois, who is leading this in the House. Gutierrez, incidentally, is a former member of the pro-Cuban Marxist-Leninist Puerto Rican Socialist Party. So, and to prove a little issue, which organisation 20 years ago in this country was leading the charge against illegal immigration?
Unions.
Exactly. They were constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties for any employer caught employing illegal aliens, because they saw that illegal immigrants were unfair competition for union members. They would drive wages and conditions down. Very logical. So how come, think about it now, which organisation in 2014 is leading the charge to legalise illegal immigrants?
Unions.
The AFL-CIO, the unions. So why was it bad for union workers then, but it's good for union workers now? Why is that?
It's not good for union workers.
It's not, man. The important issue is this. Before 1995, the AFL-CIO was there to represent the interests of its members. After 1995, when Democratic Socialists of America took over the unions, it became there to promote socialist revolution. Illegal immigrants are real bad for union workers, folks, but they are great for socialist revolution. The AFL-CIO is quite happy to sell out its own membership because the revolution comes first, people. Now, why do they want this? And I'll tell you who it was that got them to change. It took 5 years of lobbying from 1995 to 2000 to get the AFL-CIO to reverse its policy from anti-illegal immigrant to pro-illegal immigrant. It ain't easy to get union members to vote against their own interests. It took Eliseo Medina 5 years to do it, folks, but he did it. A Marxist got him to change their policy. So why do they want it? What's the big deal? Well, Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago. He got up in front of all the comrades and said, passing an immigration bill is the #1 priority of the progressive movement. We have to get citizenship and voting rights for our 11 million undocumented workers. It's our #1 priority. And did he talk about compassion or reuniting families or giving immigrants a break or the American dream or helping the economy? Not a bloody word, folks. All he said was this. In 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we give these people citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us at least 8 million more Democratic Party votes. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, but for the foreseeable future. In other words, a democratic, one-party state controlled by the communists and the unions. That's the plan, people. Because you think about it. If they get those 8 million more votes, Texas goes blue. And you combine the Southwest goes blue. If you combine the electoral college votes from Texas, your second most populous state, with the electoral college votes from California, which they've already got through the immigration thing, combine those together, it makes it mathematically impossible for the Republicans to ever win another presidential election. It cannot be done, people. It cannot be done. And if you think the Democrats are arrogant now, imagine what they'll be like with 8 million more votes in their pocket and the Republicans permanently out of office. It wouldn't just be the IRS they send after you. This country won't become like France or Germany, folks. It'll become like Venezuela very quickly and Cuba not far behind. Because that is the plan. And if you think, and you still have people in the GOP telling you this is good for the Republican Party, they are not only betraying their own party, they are betraying their country, folks. And they need to be primaried out as soon as possible. Now, the other thing the book is about is the individuals, because individuals are accountable. I profile 51 members of the House and 14 senators with identifiable ties to various communist, radical, anti-American elements. Fully documented, folks. 80 pages of documentation in a 700-page book. Now, anybody in this room, not counting military, who's ever applied for a federal government job who's willing to admit it? Nobody? Yeah, in Nevada it doesn't surprise me. In Virginia it's a bit different. Okay. Now I know, and contradict me if I'm wrong, if you apply for a federal government job in this country, you need an FBI security clearance. And they can go through your underwear drawers, folks, your childhood background, any dodgy relatives you might have, drug habits, overseas travel, education, work history. They can take 2 years. They can be very, very thorough. I've got a friend who was denied a job in your federal government because the FBI drove up to Canada to interview his communist uncle. And that was enough to nix him. But what happens if you're a young radical like Raul Grijalva or Kirsten Sinema over in Arizona, and you hang around with the Communist Party, and they control the local Democratic Party, and they have the ability to get you elected to Congress, and you can serve on the Armed Services Committee, or the Homeland Security Committee, or the Science and Technology Committee, or the Intelligence Committee, or the Judiciary Committee, and you have access to all sorts of government secrets, and you have the ability to influence public policy on a national and even international level. How much of an FBI security clearance do you need for that one, folks?
None.
Zero.
Same as president.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because the people are supposed to vet the candidates, right?
Yes.
And the media is supposed to help you do it, right? How's that one working out for you?
Good.
Look, they did it with Sarah Palin. They did their job there.
Yeah.
They went through her kids' Facebook pages. They brought up her husband's association with the Alaska Independence Party because you had the right to know about Sarah Palin because she might be vice president one day. But you don't have the right to know about the D's, folks, because that's different, because the media is their friends. Now, you imagine if you're a foreign intelligence officer, say a North Korean or a Cuban or an Iranian or a Chinese or even a Russian, and you had union and communist friends in this country who had the ability to get their supporters and sympathisers elected to your Congress and Senate to get any information they wanted and influence public policy in certain directions. Those intelligence officers from those countries, folks, are under huge pressure. If they screw up, they don't just lose their pensions. So they have that opportunity to infiltrate the heart of your government. And there's no security checks. What do you think they're doing about it, people? Do you think they'd be not taking advantage of that amazing opportunity? Do you think they're that stupid? Look, you've got people like John Conyers, head of the Judiciary Committee for years, 50-year history with the Communist Party USA. You've got Rosa DeLauro out of Connecticut, one of your senior Democrats. top Democrats, second or third ranking in the House, I think. She has got an office in the headquarters of the Connecticut Communist Party. Her best friend is Joelle Fishman, the head of that party. She is the one in the Communist who is delegated by the Communist Party to liaise with the Democrats. She's the daughter-in-law of a known Soviet spy. You've got Barbara Lee and Nancy Pelosi, both 40-year histories with the communist movement. You've got Eddie Bernice Johnson and Ralph Grijalva and Kirsten Sinema, all communist affiliates. You've got Patty Murray, the senator from Washington State, just the same. You've got Bernie Sanders, long-time history with Democratic Socialists of America and the Communist Party USA. You've got Danny Davis and Jan Schakowsky and Jerry Nadler, all card-carrying members of Democratic Socialists of America while serving in your Congress. Eddie Bernice Johnson, get to that, man. You've got Eddie Bernice Johnson, Communist Party supporter from Texas. Tammy Baldwin, freshman senator from Wisconsin, long-time member of a support network for the Colombian narco-terrorists. She's moved several resolutions in your House to try and get military aid cut to the anti-communist government in Colombia so her friends can win that revolution. You've got Judy Chu out of California. Looks like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Beautiful haircut, lovely dresser, softly spoken. One of the heads of the Progressive Caucus, the head of the Asia Pacific Caucus in your conference, one of the most influential bodies in your Congress, a member of Obama's re-election committee, goes to China all the time to build ties, business ties between California and China. When she's in China, she says, "I am coming home." The Chinese press describe her as their agent, as China's agent in your Congress. Go back to Greensboro, North Carolina in 1979. The Communist Workers' Party, a hardcore Marxist group, hardcore Maoist, pro-Chinese Marxist group, got in a street gun battle with the KKK. 5 people died in the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina. Pretty extreme group, I would say. Judy Chu used to head one of their main fronts. She still, right now, works with at least 5 former members of the Communist Workers' Party, right now. She's one of your senior Democrats. You have members of the Congressional Black Caucus who go down to Cuba on a regular basis to confer with the Castro brothers. And I quote Raul Castro in my book. He boasts about how these people talk to him about how they're going to try and influence policy in your Congress to loosen trade and travel restrictions on Cuba. Basically so they can send more spies and terrorists to your country. What do you call it, folks, when someone goes from your country to an enemy country to work with them against you? What's the penalty for that one, people?
Death.
And they do it every day. And nobody says boo, folks. Nobody says boo. There's at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your Senate who wouldn't get a basic security clearance to clean the toilets at any military base in your country. And neither would your President. You think that might be an issue, folks? Think it might cause you a few problems. But I don't want to bring you down or depress you folks with any of that.
Too late.
But late. Sorry, look, stay for the rest of it. I hate it when people leave now, because that's what they're probably going to do. Okay? And he's a good man that just left, so I hope he's not going to do that. Look, if I thought there was no hope for America, I'd be back in my beautiful New Zealand right now, building bunkers and stocking up on baked beans. Okay? And I'm not mocking prepping, believe me. But in 2008, the left thought they had a slam dunk in this country. They thought they had it in the bag, folks, because they had the House, they had the Senate, and they had their man in the White House. And they had their agenda all written out. They were going to steamroll Middle America out of existence once and for all. 40 years of work, people. 40 years of infiltration of the Democratic Party and the unions and the media and the universities, and they were going to finally take out the great Satan. Their ducks were finally in a row. And who was going to stop them? John Boehner?